And gentlemen, it is now time. 3 minutes past the 11 a.m. hour, the top of the hour. Your boy is in the building. SportsRap D here with you for another installment of the SportsRap podcast right here on Heat 100 Radio. And as you know, we are live as always. I'm live here on Facebook in the group SportsRap Podcast. And I've got a lot of members, got a lot of friends who have tuned in and who check in with me each and every week. They also stay with me all week long on social media. But if you have not joined, sent the request to join, just get over to the group on Facebook, SportsRap Podcast. Request to join the group, and myself or one of my partners, the administrators, will get you in so you don't miss anything that's going on with us here on SportsRap. So as you know, it is Monday morning. We do what we do. We're going to get into our usual, our scores, our news, and our updates. Then we'll get into the meat of the show. Just posted this morning. We're going to do our news and stuff. We're going to talk some NFL. We're going to talk about the crazy wild card weekend. We're going to talk about the Eagles. Then we're going to move into the NBA. We're going to talk some Sixers. We're going to talk about that COVID issue and a few other things going on with the NBA. And got a couple other stories that might get sprinkled in. So without further ado, let's get into our news and updates for January the 11th, 2021. So we are already 11 days into a new year. I hope things are looking better for everyone. I am looking better because I am staying positive. I'm staying focused. And I've already made it a point that, and a statement that 2021 is going to be a better year for me than 2020 was, because I'm going to make it that way. So that's what we have to do, folks. We got to make our years better. Can't plan it. We just got to do it. Because if you plan it, you may get a hiccup in that plan, and it might deter you, may have you thinking you can't do it. So just keep your mind focused, stay straight and narrow, and do whatever you need to do to keep yourself focused on your goal of having a better year in 2021. So congratulations to Earl the Pearl Monroe, who is getting a charter school named after him in New York City. The school is going to be named the Earl Monroe New Renaissance Basketball High School. It's going to be located in the Bronx. So shout outs to him for that accomplishment. Earl the Pearl Monroe, Philly's own, Winston-Salem's own. If you don't know anything about him, Google him and find out about him, and you will know the history of Earl the Pearl Monroe. And if you are a Philadelphian and a basketball fan, if you haven't done it, if you don't know, you are behind the ball. You need to get on that ASAP. All right. Mike Tyson is set to fight Michael Jai White. I'm going to try and talk a little bit about that if we get through our other stuff. That was one of the things that was added late in the show. Adrian Bronner is scheduled to fight again on February the 13th. Over the weekend, or the past week or so, LaMelo Ball becomes the youngest NBA player to notch a triple-double in a game. Jason Tatum is entering a 10 to 14-day quarantine. The Washington Wizards starting center Thomas Bryant tears the ACL and is out for the remainder of the season. The Los Angeles Chargers have fired Anthony Lynn. Might try and talk a little bit about that, something that I don't really understand why they fired him, but that's another story. We'll try to get to that down the line. Also, other injuries in the NBA. Markelle Fultz is also out with the torn ACL for the remainder of the season. With that being said, folks, we are going to move right into, I usually would take a break, but there wasn't a lot of news and stuff going on. We were sidetracked with the events last week of the attack on the Capitol building. And that is crazy because the thing is, when the Black Lives Matters protests were going on, there were National Guardsmen lined up on the steps of the Capitol before the protest started, or as the protest started. There has been recently in social media and other platforms, It's continuous comparison. And I'm sure you, if you were tuned in, excuse me, to the morning rush this morning, No Chill actually brought that up and mentioned that she would like people to stop comparing it, because there is no comparison to what occurred last week and the Black Lives Matters, or the BLM movement, if you want to call it that. So the events from last week were shaking, disturbing, troubling, and there's a whole bunch of other words. What's going on, Ivan? Tried to bring you in, but something's going on and it's not working, so I'm going to try again. And like I said, troubling, disturbing, whatever you want to call it. It's a lot of words that can be used to describe what happened last week. And it had an effect on the sports world, because a lot of players and coaches and members of the NBA immediately took and made comments about the situation. Some of them were asked in press conferences and all of that stuff, but they immediately said some things about what was going on. And what surprised a lot of people was the fact that these racist, Trump-supporting protesters made it into the building and onto the Senate floor, which is crazy. It's crazy. Now, I'm going to be one to say this immediately. That wouldn't have been us. And these thoughts that I'm getting ready to give you are my thoughts and my thoughts only. So if you have anything you want to say, if you're tuned in, please chime in and let me know. I'm going to say this, that our people, black people, that's not something that we would do. We would get to the steps, maybe do some other things, but we're not going to force our way into a building that is a federal building, federally protected. Okay. You can be charged with treason for doing this. And we're still waiting to see what happens. We've seen some people have been arrested slowly but surely. Cameras all over the place. So they're going to catch a lot of them. But the problem is the simple fact that it was crazy and it should have never happened. Again, if that was black people, believe it or not, you take it how you want to take it, there would have been some people shot in that building. Yeah, Ivan, I saw him just call me. When I take a break, I'll give him a call back. If there were some black people, if that was a group of black people, there would have been some people shot. The National Guard would have been there prior or at the very beginning. They wouldn't have had to have been called in to deal with the situation. They would have been on site if there had been black people down there. So that's a whole other thing. And some of the things I've heard in the past couple of days, and even as early as this morning, that, you know, people were talking about Donald Trump, the racist president, the racist former president, if you will, because we are counting down to the inauguration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. But his mantra for his campaign and his whole term was "Make America Great Again." And something that I heard on the radio earlier this morning was that's not really what it was. If you read between the lines, what was said was that they wanted to make America the way it was back in the 60s when the white folk were in charge, when there were separate bathrooms, separate water fountains, and all that other stuff for colored folks or black people. So that's what they wanted. And they didn't get their way. So they thought they had a good way of trying to take it, just like they tried to steal the election. It's not the first time that has been done, but this time was amplified even more due to the racist persons that were behind all of this. So with that being said, I'm going to move on. I'm going to let that go for now, because I could talk about that for a while, but I'm going to let that go for now and get into what I do. Wildcard weekend in NFL began over the weekend. We had games on Saturday. We had games on Sunday. I'm going to give you all the scores. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these games and that's going to lead us into our first break. We're going to talk about some of these games, then we're going to talk some Eagles, and then we'll take a break and come back and get into some NBA stuff. So on Saturday, the Colts just fall to the Bills 27-24. The Bucks beat Washington 31-23, and the Rams outlast the Seahawks 30-20. Then yesterday's games, the Ravens get their win. They beat the Titans 20-13. The Bears fall to the Saints 21-9, and the Browns put something on the Steelers, end up winning that game 48-37. Definitely going to talk about that. But let's backtrack a little bit, folks, and let's get into Saturday's games. Let's talk a little bit Buffalo and Indianapolis. Okay. I, for one, picked Buffalo, and I've been saying to people, I like Buffalo. And no, I'm not saying that I'm a Buffalo Bills fan or anything like that. I'm just watching football, calling a spade a spade. I think that aside from the two teams that had to buy the number one seeds, the Packers in the NFC and the Chiefs in the AFC, aside from those two teams, I don't think there's any team that anybody wants to play outside of the Bills. Nobody, let me say that again. I said that wrong. Nobody wants to play the Bills right now, I don't believe. I think I like their defense. Actually, I love their defense, the way that they played throughout the entire season. And their offense just seemed to get better and better as the weeks progressed. Former Eagle coach, defensive coordinator there, Sean McDermott, has done a wonderful job this year with that team. And they are doing their thing. And now, Indianapolis played them a little tougher than I expected. I didn't expect that game to be that close on Saturday, but nonetheless, the Bills do what they do, or do what they have been doing, and they found a way to win. And that's what teams do that are on this track right now, that are in the playoffs, teams that you consider or call winners. They find ways to win games. The Bills, again, to me, are the scariest team in the playoffs. Like I said, aside from the two number one seeds, and we know what they are, we know who they are. But out of all the other teams, the scariest team, in my opinion, is the Buffalo Bills right now. So they're moving on. And I have that schedule. I'll give you that schedule once we get finished discussing some of these games, because we have a divisional round schedule. It's set now. Also on Saturday, you had the Rams and the Seahawks, which started out as a little bit of a strange game. The Rams were fielding a backup quarterback at the beginning of that game, and just by chance, he got injured, and Jared Goff had to come in and play the remainder of the game. A division game, if you will, in the playoffs. Both of these teams are out of the same division. They understand each other. They know each other, so they know each other's tendencies. So it was a pretty good game. I thought that Seattle would outlast them, but it didn't work out that way, and the Rams get that game 30-20. Then you have the Bucks and the Washington football team. So with that game, arguably the weirdest game in the playoffs. And I'm talking about this to the missus last night. I'm talking to some other people, and I even mentioned it last week on air, that I kind of feel like the playoffs need to be tweaked a little bit. And I know that they did some tweaking. They added another team. So there's 3 games on Saturday now and 3 games on Sunday, as opposed to it being 2 games each day in Wild Card Weekend, which is good. But you have a team that was 7-9 that made it to the playoffs, and they made it because they won their division. Okay, and I give you that. And I understand that's the way the football playoffs are set up. Each division winner gets into the playoffs. It's just a matter of other things sprinkled in to figure out where they're seated at. I feel like the way that they do the playoffs in the NFL, I feel like you should be at least 500 to get in the playoffs. 8-8. And then, there was talk about, well, there might be more than one team that's 8-8. I said, but you can decipher that. The same way you pick the seeds, you can go to conference record, You can go to other head-to-head matches and things of that nature where you can get an 8-8 team in. And that would possibly mean, like, for example, this year, that would have meant that the NFC East division winner would not be in the playoffs. I would have had no issue with that because of how bad the entire division was. But I constantly kept saying it is shocking and surprising that as bad as that division was, someone from that division was still going to make the playoffs. And I kind of figured that they wouldn't get past the wild card round. But the even stranger thing is they got to host a playoff game. So you had a 7-9 team hosting an 11-5 team. Yeah, go figure. Doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. It just seems really, really weird to me in that entire mix. So just my thoughts, my opinions, I think that the NFL should think about tweaking that and having it where you have to be at least 8-8 to get in the playoffs. That's just my thoughts and my opinions. So then we move into yesterday's games. And the Ravens got their win. Lamar Jackson got his first playoff win. And I'm sure he is super relieved. I'm sure that he feels like the monkey is off of his back because, God forbid, if they had lost, there would have been a lot of chatter about Lamar Jackson not being playoff worthy, yada, yada, yada. So they got the win. They defeat the Titans 20-13. The Bears didn't really think they would do anything with the Saints, Now, we move into the closing game of Wild Card Weekend, Sunday night, Browns and the Steelers. Steelers give up 28 points in the first quarter alone. First play of the game, they have a bad snap, ends up in a touchdown, getting the ball rolling for Cleveland. The end of that game, the Steelers looked like they might be able to make somewhat of a comeback, but it got to the point when I was watching that game at home late that then I realized that I didn't think that they were going to do it. And it's just what I thought. They ran out of time. But Cleveland just played each other. I think it was 3 weeks in a row they played each other, or 2 weeks in a row at least. And Cleveland looked like the better team throughout. Cleveland looked like they wanted it more. And it turned out that they did because they won. 48 points against the Steelers team that started out 11-0, got into a little funk, and that funk carried into Wild Card Weekend in the playoffs. And they are out now. Cleveland moves on. But the weird thing is that you just played this team. I'm going to go, yesterday might have been the third week in a row. Or worse, it was the second week in a row. And you kind of have to know the tendencies. Like I said, the Rams-Seahawks game on Saturday, divisional game. But that was a closer game, 30-20. It was just weird seeing that game 28-0 at the end of the first quarter, 35-10 at halftime. But like I said, the Steelers made a valiant effort. It just wasn't enough, and it wasn't enough time for them to get past the Cleveland Browns. And the Browns move on in that route. So the divisional round is now set. Okay, your divisional round on Saturday, the Rams will go to Green Bay to play the Packers at 4:30 on Fox. The Ravens will go to Buffalo to play the Bills. That game is 8:15 on NBC. Then on Sunday, the Browns are at the Chiefs. It's 3:05, and the Bucks are at the Packers. I'm sorry. The Rams are. Let me see. I've got to look at that again because I made a mistake. The Rams, I think, go to New Orleans some kind of way. Somehow the Rams will go to New Orleans, or is it? Yes, the Rams will go. No, the Rams go to. The Rams will go to Green Bay, and Tampa Bay will go to New Orleans. Okay, because the number 1 seed gets the lowest remaining seed. The Rams were the number 6. The Bucks were number 5. So the Rams will go to the Packers, and the Bucks will go to the Saints. 6:40 on Fox on Sunday. So with that being said, we now move into some talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. And there's been a lot of talk about who's going to go, who's going to stay. There's also been a lot of talk about that Week 17 tanking game. They gave that game away when they benched Jalen Hurts and put in Nate Sudfeld. We have come to find out through media circuits that was more than likely a 3-headed decision between Howie, Coach, and Jeffrey Lurie. Okay, so now there's meetings coming up for the end of the season, and people are saying that, Doug Peterson should be fired. There are also people that are saying Howie should be fired. There are people that are saying both of those guys should be gone. But here's the thing. Let's play devil's advocate here and say that Jeffrey Lurie wants to part ways with Doug. Is that really the right decision? Okay, it's also been rumored that Doug Peterson had a meeting previous to the upcoming meeting today or tomorrow with Jeffrey Lurie, and arguably or possibly demanded that he have a say in picking his own coaching staff in order for him to keep his job for next year. But the question is, like I said, if Doug Peterson is fired and Howie Roseman is kept, is that the right person that was being let go? We've already seen Jim Schwartz resign. We've also seen that there are some other coaches, quarterbacks coaches, some other coaches that will not return. But again, the question is, if Doug Peterson does end up getting fired, is that the right person? Okay. Again, people ask me about the Eagles having the number 6 overall pick in the upcoming draft in April. My question is, yeah, that's fine, but with past history and the GM that's still in place, a little shaky on what they're going to do with that pick. There's a lot of ways they can go. There's a lot of ways they need to go. And again, still questionable about what they will do with that pick, knowing their past history and knowing the picks that they have made in the past. So you could arguably say, again, that one of these guys or both of these guys should be gone. The backing for each argument for Doug Peterson's sake, or in Doug Peterson's role, the bobbling or the mishandling of Carson Wentz, the benching of Carson Wentz as late in the season as it was, the decision making, especially in Game 7 and Week 17. So it's a lot there. And you look on the other side, and you look at Howie Roseman, and you just basically look at the draft picks that were made over the past several years, and you decide, or it makes it hard to come to a decision on which one, or if not both, should be let go. So you have an argument for both things. You have an argument possibly for Doug Peterson staying. You have an argument for Doug Peterson being fired. And you definitely have an argument for Howie Roseman being fired. So we will see what Jeff Lurie has up his sleeve. We will see what Jeff Lurie does once these meetings take place. I think they're either today or tomorrow. But we'll get reports, and I'll report to you as I get information on what takes place, or what we will be privy to, what took place in those meetings. But it is very, very dysfunctional in the Eagles organization. And again, like I said last week, that's all the way across the board, from front office, management, coaching staff, locker room. It is very dysfunctional right now. There are players on that team who are scratching their heads still about that Week 17 decision to bench Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts himself is probably still scratching his head as to why he was pulled in that game. So the dysfunction, I think, has to start at the top. You have to settle it there first. And then you can put things in order to progressively attempt to straighten up some other stuff. Curtis, what's going on? Thanks for tuning in. So you can start. I just think, in my opinion, not you can, in my opinion, I think it starts at the top. And I think these meetings will possibly shed a little bit of light on what may happen in the next several weeks, progressing up until free agency and the draft. But in my opinion, I think it has to start at the top, at the very top. And like I said, if you start at the top, you can get things in place. You can get a plan to attempt to progressively fix the rest of the dysfunction within the organization. But there is a lot of dysfunction within the organization right now. I mean, you can actually play that in the whole division. There's some dysfunction in the division on other teams as well. But the Eagles right now is, like I like to say, they are a mess. And I don't think it's going to be fully fixed by next season. There's still going to be some hiccups because I don't think it's going to get completely fixed in this offseason. It's not going to happen. I can see that now because there's so much confusion right now. So I can pretty much rest assured and tell you that it will not be completely fixed within this offseason. There will be some remnants next season of this dysfunction. Hopefully it will be minimized. This is what we all, as fans, this is what we all are looking for, to minimize eventually delete the dysfunction within this organization. But it's going to be tough. It is going to take some time. So we will see how this thing plays out with the Eagles, and we will continue on with the NFL playoffs, and we'll have reports and all of that for you. With that being said, it is now 11:31. I'm going to take my first break. When I come back, we're going to get into some NBA stuff. We're going to talk some Sixers. We're going to talk about this coronavirus that has hit the NBA. And again, I still give NBA kudos for how they're handling things. But there are some questions right now and some possible things that could be taking place or could be put in order to help with the situation. We're going to talk about some other overall NBA stories. And like I said, we're going to talk some Sixers as well. You are tuned in to SportsRap Heat 100 Radio. It's your boy, SportsRap D. See you on the other side in just a couple minutes. 100 Radio.